Welcome to the latest episode of the Informing Choices mini-pod. Somatic awareness refers to the conscious recognition and understanding of sensations, movements, and physiological states within the body. It involves paying attention to bodily experiences such as tension, relaxation, pain, breathing, or posture, often as they occur in the moment. The question is, what role could somatic awareness play in the future of leadership, given that our world is very likely to bear witness to exponential change and the adoption of automation technologies across life, society, and business? In today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome back to the podcast Relational Systems Architect, Leadership Development and Impact Coach, and creator of Mycelium Collab, Alessandra Marazzi, to explore this question. Alessandra, a warm welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's a joy to be back here. Thank you very much.
And why don't we start with this? I mean, I've kind of laid out some of what somatic
Mhm.
awareness could be in terms of my research, but how do you describe it? What is somatic awareness to you?
Well, fundamentally, somatic awareness is just the awareness of the body, is the awareness that we are a body. We don't just have a body, we are. And we are a body. That means that we are those sensations, we are those movements, we are those relationships with the external world that create pressures and tensions and temperatures inside our body. So that's how I describe it.
And do you think very often we forget our connection with us and what we're feeling as we go through our daily routines, particularly with so much change, so much stress?
Mm.
It's something perhaps we don't pay much attention to, do you think?
I guess we don't. I have a feeling that if we were more inside the body, we would be experiencing this world in a very different way. And also, I guess our actions would be kind of different because the being outside of the body or and not connected to the body is a defense mechanism that we develop to be able to cope with life. Because being inside the body can be a gruesome experience, as you mentioned before. We are much more connected to the pain, the grief, the anxiety, the but also the aliveness, the joy, and all these subtle sensations, and that can be overwhelming. And so, to function, to cope, to protect ourselves, we kind of sever that capacity. As we do so, we also sever our relationship with others, with ourselves, and with the world.
Now that's really interesting, and I'm sure we'll come back to that at the moment, the kind of the connection between the relationships that we have and form, and how we're feeling inside. Um, but I wanted to address this next issue as well. Given the radical change we're likely to see between now and say 2050, how does the need for somatic awareness change, do you think?
I don't think the need for somatic awareness changes. It just becomes it just becomes more compelling um, to come back to it, to come back to this experience of being a body and living through a body. Because unless, I guess, Steve, the question is what kind of future we want. Because depending on that, then we may make this decision whether we want to be inside the body or not. Being inside the body would influence, I think, the kind of future we can have towards a more kind, a kinder, more empathetic, slower way of living. So if that's the kind of future we want, then there is no way around that. There is no way around re-familiarizing with our human experience and our somatic experience.
Is that in part about uh, relieving the tension perhaps between what you've just described and what many people would identify as the reality of their world.
Help me understand a little bit better the question.
So what you've laid out so far is very clear about the benefits of understanding how we feel, how what's going on inside our bodies, of how we should perhaps take a bit of a step back, perhaps slow down to speed up is one phrase that
Mm,
comes to mind when I hear you talk. And I'm imagining that we might understand that, but it sets up a bit of a tension within us between those ideals and the
mhm.
reality of our world, which is forever changing. It's high
Yeah,
stress, it's highly paced. There's
yeah,
lots of change. There's lots of things going on that's beyond our control, which
yeah,
makes us naturally feel uneasy.
yeah.
So is there a job of work to do in
Mm.
exploring that tension between those things so that we can release that knowledge, those experiences to make that reality more palatable?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for naming this tension. And it, I can tell you from my own experience that making the choice of slowing down, which sometimes is not a choice. Sometimes life calls us to do that, whether because we get sick or whether because something happens that calls us to step out of the rhythm in which we got into. And when we make that choice, when I made that choice, for example, last year, it was overwhelming at first because it felt I could no longer cope with my own life. And I started to ask myself, how did I manage before to hold all of this together and to run at this speed? And it is unnerving. There is a moment when we are confronted with that discomfort that life is escaping us, that we are out of sync. And in my case, what I discovered was almost paradoxically, the more I slowed down, the more I came back to the rhythm of my heart, to the rhythm of the earth as well. The more I came back to that, the more life seemed to expand. And my capacity to be with life seemed to be expanding.
Mhm.
So I guess it's doing less to do more, rephrasing what you said before, is maybe the paradoxical reality that we can engage with and experiment with. It's also true that that tension is possibly a tension between a felt sense of life and a conceptual, abstract sense of life. Mm? So the felt sense of life, um, as I said, it's rich, it's complex, it's chaotic, it's messy. Mm? That conceptual sense of life that we seem to pursue and to chase is fast and efficient and organized and linear and all of that. Is that life though? I mean, that's the question that I was asking at the beginning. I have the feeling sometimes we are chasing a future that we don't really want to inhabit. And so maybe we can lean back a bit in this beautiful back spine that we have that can hold our body and notice again how life is meant to support us. It's not calling us to chase it.
That's what's really interesting about what you've said there for me is that we sort of ignore the organic and create a world that's mechanical.
Mm,
And perhaps that's the piece that's actually not natural for us. So, I'm kind of hearing what you say and say, well, actually, somatic awareness allows me to think about that organic piece, which perhaps allows me to experience the mechanical piece in a healthier way. the other thing I was going to say, actually, I meant to say at the beginning, I love that phrase, rhythm of my heart. So, thinking back to, what is it happening with me? So stop, relax, feel, think, reflect, all those kind of things. And perhaps some of that tension then goes away. And I'm really fascinated by this notion of the link between somatic awareness and creating a future that we might want to inhabit rather than the one we seem to be heading towards by default.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can take some of those things into my third question, which is about this kind of highly digitized world full of automation technologies that we're in, that's likely to expand along those kind of lines. If we expect workers, employees, colleagues to change given the way that new jobs are emerging, perhaps fewer jobs might exist in the future. What role do you think leaders should play in the context of somatic awareness? Does knowledge of somatic awareness become one of these key, what we've been calling so far soft skills, which others are calling vital skills, in the future of leadership? Does it play a role there, do you think?
I think it does. I think it does. I would want to imagine a world where leaders are connected to themselves, are connected to people, are connected to the world they inhabit. There is no way of being in a relationship with ourselves, the people around us, or the world with being outside of the body. There is no way. The body is our instrument of connection, is our sounding board, sounding chamber, is really an instrument, is like a vessel through which we come in a relationship. So without that connection, without that awareness, we are doomed to operate at a speed that is not human, that turns living systems into mechanical systems, that kills the joy, the aliveness into our experiences, and breaks our relationships. So I don't think there is a way around that. Somatic awareness, in my own experience, in my own research, is connected to us tapping into some fundamental human capacities: courage, curiosity, compassion, empathy. All the vital skills are grounded in us being present. And the body is our anchor to become present. There is no time and there is no space than here and now in the body.
Mm.
So it is the instrument to become clear in a world that seems so confusing, to connect it to a sense of directionality, again, to bring us in connection with others. So I really hope that our future leadership is a connected one.
I might not have asked this question were it not for the last 3 to 4 weeks. But is there an issue here? Is there a gender divide between an understanding of the kind of things that you're talking about between the masculine and the feminine? Because I'm just thinking back, particularly during the COVID pandemic, there were some really interesting examples where not exclusively, but it seemed that elements of the pandemic at a national and government level were handled in a different way when the nation's leader was a woman rather than a man.
Mm.
And I'm now seeing kind of saber rattling, aggressive postures to achieve political ends, naming no names, although I'm sure we both can. So is there a bit of a gender divide here? And do we need to work perhaps a bit harder to instill some of this knowledge and these experiences into the masculine?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I like the fact that you talk about masculine and feminine because I don't think it's gender specific, so to speak, but it's more two capacities that we have. And the masculine is traditionally associated with certain skills and certain capacities, and the feminine is associated with that fluidity, creativity, connectedness. Now, if we go back to our history, we have told just one story. The story that has to do with winning, with conquering, with competing, with the story of the spear, if you like, of the spear. How do you say in English?
Yeah, spear.
The
Yeah.
story of the web, the spear. Thank
Yes.
you, thank you. And what if we told another story? And here I'm not using my own words, but I'm quoting Ursula Le Guin, who talks about the carrier bag story. What if we had told the story of those who carried the bag, the messy container in which we hold all our lives, the story of those who were leaning behind and wrestling with the oat instead of a mammoth, you know. So if we had told that story, I think our leadership would be very different today. And as anything, life is cyclical and we will come back and we are coming back to incorporating, integrating all these sides, the masculine and the feminine. And sometimes we feel like we are swinging a bit still, and it's just part of the normal process of integrating. So I
Alessandra,
just want to say one
yes.
thing.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
you asked me about technologies, and just comes to another thing comes to mind that I want to mention. You know, somatic awareness in the to make a technology analogy is a bit like going back to analog.
Right.
Is it's a bit like coming back to the vinyl, the beauty and the richness of the sound and the messiness of the noises in the background. And we have tried to take those noises out of the picture. And digital technologies have broken down realities in a in a 0-1 code. And this is also what our mind does. Our mind breaks down reality to make sense of it in a code of 0-1 of dualities. The body is our instrument is our analogic instrument, if you like, to re-experience life as a wave rather than 0-1 code.
Is that because we often have a temptation to simplify things rather than embrace the natural complexity of the world
Mm,
around us?
I think we are capable of both.
Yeah, yeah.
And however, under stress, under pressure, we revert more to a coping strategy, and that includes a simplification and reductionism, if you like, and that's okay under stress. But the problem is that we end up operating in that way the whole time because our life puts so much effort on us. A few days ago, somebody told me I was feeling guilty for not wanting to watch the news because I feel such a deep grief in my chest that almost makes me not functioning for the rest of the day if I start my day
Mm.
watching the news or reading the news. And this woman reminded me that our nervous systems developed for embracing the pain, the grief, and life of 150 people. That was the size of our communities. Now our nervous system is holding the reality of 8 billion people. And we are just not. The nervous system is not ready for it. Hence, that's why we close down. That's why we simplify. That's why we polarize. That's why we divide, we form judgments, so we form dualities, just to be able to cope with all of that. And again, so if we come back to being human and to a dimension of humanity, and maybe also as organizations, as leadership, if we were to stop for a moment to talk about growth and ask ourselves, what is the human dimension of this reality? A dimension that is both human and earthy, that allows for regenerative patterns to emerge. That would be a more solid basis, I guess, for operating at the speed of our heart.
I love that idea of regeneration there. That's really lovely. And the other thing I wanted to say that I'd kind of scribbled down about 2 minutes ago is we are human now and we will be human in the future. And perhaps that's kind of quite difficult sometimes for us to remember. But it's certainly something that I'll remember as a result of this conversation.
Yeah, the question is, what kind of humans do we want to be?
Wow. That's a brilliant question to leave on. I think, what kind of humans do we want to be? Alessandra, that's been absolutely marvelous. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And just like last time, I feel kind of lifted as a result of speaking with you. So thank you so much for your time. That's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you so much, Steve. I always feel like I would want this conversation to last the 2 hours. So thank you so much for this space.
And thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss another episode of the podcast again. And do let your friends and colleagues know all about the Informing Choices mini pod. We'll see you again soon.